to mute everyone and then open it up at certain points, or if you want to say something, just unmute yourself. But let me mute all and unmute Paula.
Oh, yes, let me unmute myself.
Okay.
Yep, I'm unmuted too, Anthony.
Okay, thank you. And Jen. Okay. All right, well, again, everybody, thank you all for joining this webinar where we're going to look at the revised annual report. We hope you like what you'll see. The three presenters are Jen Cernica. Jen joined CAHME several months ago as our accreditation coordinator. Myself, Anthony Stanowski, and the third presenter is Paula Song. And Paula just really did yeoman's work with her committee probably since last May or June on this process, and really dedicated a lot of time. And the improvements that you'll see in here are really the work of the folks on the committee. We're going to look at 4 parts on the agenda today. Number 1, a brief introduction in what we did. Number 2, a little review of the process and some of the changes that we made. Some commonly asked questions. We've tried this out with a couple different groups along the way, and we've got some questions that we think folks will ask, and we'll try to clarify them. And then we'll actually go through the survey question by question and give you a chance to ask some questions about the way that we phrase things. So we'll go through that part. So next. Just to remind people, the reason why we do this annual report is for 2 reasons. Number 1, as an accreditor, we want to make sure that our programs can continue to meet their mission in keeping with our accreditation standards. So there's questions on the survey that says, has anything changed substantially since last year in certain areas? And those are the things that we're responsible for as accreditors, as monitoring. The second one is to provide outcomes data and key program characteristics that we're required to report publicly by CHIA, which is the Council on Higher Education Accreditation. And this is also part of CAHME's mission to provide information and let the public know how our programs are doing and meeting our standards and outcomes. So those are the key 2 reasons why we do this annual report. Paula, do you want to go through this slide?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. So this is Paula Song. I'm at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I feel like I've been very fortunate to be part of this group to really think about how we might enhance the annual survey and make it not only more user-friendly for programs, but more useful for benchmarking purposes and also for CAHME. This was a joint effort, and we had several dedicated survey committee members, including Ken Hanover, who was great in terms of providing a good practitioner perspective, Sue Boren from the University of Missouri, Murray Cote from Texas A&M, and Eric Dietrich from Uniform Health Services University of Health Sciences. So I wanted to highlight some of the main changes that occurred. I think one of the big changes was around format. So going forward, the annual report data will be collected through SurveyMonkey, and using this tool really enables CAHME to have much greater flexibility in terms of the survey design and facilitating data analysis. It also, I think, from the program's perspective, is much easier to use than the previous platform. The surveys will be conducted for each accredited program. So for example, if you had an executive program and a residential program, you would need to complete the program for each of those. And then you would have the opportunity to denote that program in the first section. There's a specific question that asks to specify the program type. There are other questions which they're shared across different CAHME programs, and there's flexibility again because using SurveyMonkey, it allows for the data that to be reported combined or individually, and allows the user to denote that in checkbox questions throughout the survey. And so that'll be very useful too for consistency of reporting. In terms of content, this was another big change. The committee really worked to help simplify the reporting process for program directors. It took a look at the questions to see which were really important, and you know, again, asking the purpose of the questions both for CAHME's purposes and also for the program purposes and benchmarking. And so I think the end result is that it requires less time to complete, and it eliminated questions that were either redundant or where the information really wasn't necessary. And so we feel the task force really believes that the survey should now take considerably less time than it had in the past. The fourth change is around data accessibility. So programs who complete the survey will receive a summary benchmark data report. And then further programs who are participating in the enhanced benchmarking will have access to detailed program level data. And again, that's a change from the previous system. And then finally, accuracy. The programs will have an opportunity to make corrections if necessary. And so programs will be contacted if data accuracy issues are identified. You know, initially, of course, it's really important to enter complete and accurate responses from the get-go, as this data from the annual reports is going to be used in site visits, and the data that is going to be used for the publicly released data for each program on the CAHME's website.
Great, thank you, Paula, for reviewing that. Everyone, hi, this is Jen Cernica. Now I'm going to go over the frequently asked questions that we've been receiving in regards to the survey. As a reminder, only CAHME accredited programs are required to complete the survey. We did share the survey with a large group of programs not currently accredited, either in the process of gaining their accreditation or as members of AUPHA. Those other programs that do complete the survey will receive a summary benchmark report to compare your program's performance to the group. But to reiterate, only accredited programs are required. Additionally, the trial group that Paula was referring to, who worked with us, we do need you to complete the survey that was sent from SurveyMonkey on 10/21. Because of the feedback and learnings from the trial period, we did make certain changes to the survey in the tool and need those programs who participated in the trial to re-enter your responses. To assist in doing so, keep in mind SurveyMonkey sent an email upon submission, including your responses to each question. And also note for all on the call, all programs will receive an email from SurveyMonkey once you complete and submit your survey that includes your responses to each individual survey question. Also to reiterate, as Paula mentioned earlier, one survey per program is required. Also, the due date is 11/27. For accredited programs required to complete the survey, fees will start to be incurred once this deadline is missed. And for all other programs, we will close the survey on 11/27. Another question that's come up a bit is about how we save responses in the tool. And SurveyMonkey saves responses with the next button. So to clarify, at the bottom of each page, when the next button is hit, all responses entered on that page will be saved. This is important to note when moving from page to page in the survey as it's being completed. Be sure to always hit the next button to save your work done thus far on that page. And I'll show you that momentarily as well once we get into the tool. And lastly, as Anthony explained, this webinar will be recorded and shared for further reference and for those programs who could not attend today. So before I jump into the questions, does anyone have any questions on anything we've just discussed? Oh, Anthony, you're muted. Nope.
Yeah. And if you do, just a reminder to unmute yourself, which I do.
Hey, Anthony, it's Ken Harwood from George Washington University's Healthcare Quality Program.
Thanks, Ken. Hi.
How are you?
Good.
I was hoping to get clarification on the difference between certification and accreditation as related to this survey. Is it expected that the entire survey will be completed by certified programs also?
Yeah. So just very briefly for everyone out there in the healthcare management end, CAHME has begun a process of accrediting programs in healthcare quality and safety. And as an interim step, we've created a certification level for those programs. Currently, 5 healthcare quality and safety programs are certified. Accreditation is, we have to follow certain requirements for accreditation. So accredited programs must answer the survey. The certified programs, the 5 HQS certified programs, are not required, and we don't have the teeth with those programs to require you to do it. We're asking the HQS certified programs, as well as all the founding programs, though, to complete the survey because it will provide a nice benchmark for that group. So hope that helped, Ken. I mean, I think with the HQS program and what we're doing in there, it's probably something you do want to complete.
And Anthony, just as a follow-up, and the deadline would be the same?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, great. So on to the survey. Section 1 relates to questions on program description. And again, to reiterate, unless specified, all responses should be from the 2018 to 2019 academic year. So question 1, we're looking for you to define your relationship with CAHME. Question 2, define the type of school or college within the university that most closely describes where your program is. Questions 3 and 4, name the school that the program is in, as well as the department that the program is in. And here, question 5, as Paula was mentioning before, this is where we would specify the program type. So because the survey needs to be completed for each separate program, this is where you clarify which program you are referring to here. Also note, universities with more than one accredited program, a residential and an executive, for example, did receive 2 emails from SurveyMonkey with 2 links to access the survey. It does not matter which link you use for your program. We will be able to tell which you're filling it out for based on this question right here. So this is an important question. Moving on, question 6, provide the web information. Question 7, specify the degree granted and describe further and other if more than one degree is granted by your program. The following questions refer to the estimated tuition and fees. Question 8, we're looking for you to specify the currency of your fee schedule. And for the next 2 questions, we're looking for the estimated tuition and related degree fees, such as activity fees, professional development fees, etc., for the degree offered for the accredited program or for the program which you're applying for accreditation for students entering that program as of the specified date. So for question 9, we're looking for the academic year beginning September 2018. And for question 10, we're looking for the academic year beginning September 2019. This is the end of section 1. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the next button where obviously you'll click to move forward, but also to save any data that you've input on this page. Before we move forward, does anyone have any questions? Reminder to just unmute so I can hear you.
I have a question. This is Erin Rosenberg from UNLV.
Sure.
When I look, or I started filling this out, and when I hit the next button, I understand that it saves, but I'm worried that maybe my computer updates overnight and all my tabs are lost. So I went back and I tried to click the same link you sent us, and when I open up the link again, it's empty. So I understand it's saved, but I don't know how to access it if I end up closing out of the tab before I submit it.
That's a really good question, Erin. What we'll have to do is research it and get back to you with the details, because it's supposed to save it in there. One of the things that all programs we would suggest you do as well is we have versions of this survey that I believe Jen had emailed you a PDF version of the survey, and we're putting that up on our website as well. My guess is that a lot of programs will want that printed version, copy their answers down, and just kind of fill it off from here, so that way you don't ever have to worry about losing your data. But
Okay.
we'll check into that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Jen.
All right, great. Moving forward to section 2, which addresses program changes. Okay, so question 1, since the last survey, designate if any of the following changes occurred, and for any change noted above, please describe. We do review this question to be sure the program is still able to meet the required criteria that was met when the program was initially accredited, so please be sure to explain any changes. Question 2. We added this question because we received feedback that it may not be possible to separate out program-specific revenue and expense figures from the department level. Ideally, we're looking for program-specific data, but understand if that's not feasible. So here you can indicate which you're able to provide in the following section. So question 3 rather, is where we ask for these revenue and expense figures. And in question 4, if there is a major variance for the prior year, please describe in question 5, and then also include any additional comments pertaining to the revenue and expense figures that you had entered. Before I move forward, are there any questions on this section?
And Jen, it's Anthony. Let me add one comment. And this is one where Paula and her team were really incredibly valuable. We had formally asked a lot of detail about where the revenue came from and where the expenses were going toward. We examined the results from past surveys on this, and what we found was that a lot of data was incomplete, and frankly, the data wasn't really even being used. And there was a lot of inconsistencies and a wide variation from program to program. What we're looking at here in question 3 is really important. It's number 1, do you have the resources to carry out the mission that the program is accredited for? And that's both looked at from the revenue perspective and from the expense perspective. So we really want you to be thoughtful in how you answer this particular question. We also give you the ability to say, hey, we have this information, but we only have it at the department level. And answering question 2 enables you to do that, or we have it specifically for our program. But the purpose of this question is really important. CAHME's mission, making sure that you have the resources available to continue to fulfill your mission of education. Hopefully you'll see that that's a big improvement over what you had last year.
I actually have a question. This is Lindsay Breldy from the University of Colorado, Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And our funding is pretty different than most universities. And I don't believe we can even distinguish revenue at the department level. The business school as a whole would receive that revenue, and I don't know how to differentiate it specific to the health administration department.
Lindsay, great question. Thanks for asking that. And this will pertain to other programs as well. What we would suggest you do in that area is for the revenue and expense listed at the business school level. If that's the lowest gradation that you can get to, then put it at that. And then in question 5, include as comments why you list it, that you're listing it at the school level, and that's the lowest gradation that you can provide to. Now, we're not encouraging programs to do that because we really want to understand at what specific department and at your specific program, what are the revenues and expenses accruing. But in your particular case, and yeah, I know that the University of Colorado program, that probably makes the most amount of sense to do. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
All right, I will move ahead to section 3, which has questions relating to teaching and curriculum. Question 1, looking to describe the academic schedule of the university. And question 2, here we're looking for the credit hours required face-to-face in the hybrid format and required fully online. Then to total these 3 entries to calculate the required subtotal known as D. Next, to enter the elective hours required for all formats as E. And then lastly, simple calculation, just adding D plus E for the total minimum hours required for graduation. So hopefully these letters in here can give a hand in the calculations. Question 3 and 4, has there been any change to the length of the curriculum since the last survey? Question 4, if so, describe. Question 5, looking for the primary competency model that is used, and we understand that your competency model may be a blend of a few, but here we're looking just to indicate the one primary model. The last 2 questions in this section refer to internships, practicums, fellowships, and residency programs as they existed in your program for the 2018 to 2019 academic year. So for question 6, looking for the working hours required. If there are none required, please just enter a 0. And for question 7, this is specific for fellowships and residencies only, to please enter how many students in your program applied to one or more or received at least one offer. Are there any questions on section 3 before we move forward?
There was a question, and let's go up a little bit to
Sure.
The number of hours that are required versus that one. That's right.
Question 2, sure.
So I think it was Rachel asked a question about the program actually has some courses that are required in residential, or you can take those questions, take those courses online as well. And Rachel, did I characterize that? I saw it real briefly pop up in the chat.
Yes. Yes, our hours are required. Sorry, getting background. The credit hours are required, but they can be taken either format.
Okay, so Paula, would you kind of put those all in the hybrid format, or what would you think?
That's a great question. And maybe we can talk about it a little offline. I think what's most important is that however you decide to report it, that it's consistent year over year.
Yeah.
Because I think that is what will be of interest is if that is changing. I probably would lean to including it as hybrid or just part of face-to-face, because there is that option to take it face-to-face.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, thank you.
I think the real important part with this question, and the committee did a whole lot of work on it, which is to say for required courses, let's look at the face-to-face, hybrid, and fully online. And for elective courses, we don't necessarily care what format that you're looking at, because we know some elective courses might be online, others are face-to-face. So we're letting you just kind of put those elective hours combined and hopefully simplify your process of reporting those hours in there.
Hi, this is Karen Sharon. I'm at Hopkins, and I'm new this year. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so these questions are may be answered looking at the old reports, but for our second year, which is a residency, 11-month residency, they do register for academic credits. They have a preceptor. That's face-to-face, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not a didactic course, but it is considered face-to-face. Okay. I guess the other follow-up I have is for question 6, that's an embedded residency. So that would be within question 6, right?
Right. And what are and for 6, which is a little different than credit hours, designate the working hours that are required for graduation in either internships or residency. And again, what we're looking at whether they're actually required.
Right. So if it's 11 months full-time, just 11 months times a full-time salary, a full-time work week. Thank you.
Exactly, yeah.
Lou Horvath from St. Joseph, Philadelphia. The earlier question on face-to-face, hybrid, and online, we actually have all 3. So it's going to be hard to distinguish between those 3.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, Lou, you do have a residential program and an online program now, right?
Yeah, we have residential, I guess you've defined as campus-based, and we have fully online, fully campus. But our campus students can take any online course, and online students can take campus courses. So they do both. We give them a lot of flexibility.
Okay. And you know, as anything, when you create these, you realize that there's some things that we didn't quite kind of think, you know, kind of go through the variations on it. Let's the committee and myself and Jen get together with Paula, and we'll provide a little more clarification on how to answer that. I think we're going to have to. Thanks.
I asked a question in the chat. This is Erin Rosenberg again from UNLV. We changed our credit hours this academic year to 40 credit hours from 36. So you just want to know the 36 because that was 18-19, correct?
The 18-19, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm looking, Gail, going on the chat. We require attendance in virtual classroom in each course, 8 to 10 hours per course, in addition to the remainder of the online work. We consider this fully online. Is this how I report it? And yes, I would say that's how you would report it. Because that is an online course. And again, yes, it's just an online course. I don't. Tina Farrell, our residency is 8 to 12 months, but has no specific number of working hours required. That is up to the individual residency sites. So our residency is 8 to 12 months, but has no hours. How do they report that? Well, so let me ask a question, Tina. Is the residency required?
Yes, it is required.
But do you have a minimum number of hours that's required for a residency?
No, we just have deliverables that are required. So again, that's up to the individual residency sites, however much they work. I mean, they're going to work full time, but whether they require them to work 8 hours or 12 hours, we don't keep track of that. No.
Is there a required, in other words, do you say for a residency, we have to do it at least 6 months? Like,
it's usually 8 to 12 months. There have been some exceptions where a site has offered the resident a job, and if they get their deliverables in by the time the actual job begins, that's okay with us. So there have been a couple of times, I think, where 6 months, yeah, but that's the exception to the rule.
Okay. So what I would say, just in terms of guidance there, is if you say 8 months is kind of the since you are requiring a residency and you're saying you need to do probably at least 8 months. It might be a little less in a few cases, but 8 months seems to be the minimum.
Right.
I would take 8 months as the minimum and just multiply that by the number of the typical working hours in a day, and then
Okay.
use that as the base.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let me see if there's any more chats that I'm missing. We don't fit into quarter semesters or trimesters. Suggestions. There's always one question that stumped the stumped the presenter.
Hopkins is the same. We have 8-week terms, and there are 5 terms in the academic year.
Is there, Jen, could we add another choice that says other, please describe?
Yes, I can add another choice. That would be fine without impacting the results that we've already received.
Great.
So let me just take a quick note. I think I'll just add other, right, Anthony, just to encompass any other variations here.
Yeah, I think that's probably good. Will that work, Whitney?
Yes, thank you very much. That works.
Okay. Credit hours just refer to 1819. Yes, okay, so we talked to Aaron about that. Hopkins, we got. Okay, we're good. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. All right, moving on to section 4 for faculty. If you haven't seen yet, you'll notice that we've greatly shortened and reduced the faculty data that's required this year. First, question 1. This is the same question that we had in the revenue and expense section. Again, understanding that some programs may not be able to report faculty data at the individual program level versus a department level. Again, of course, program specific would be preferred, and if that's not possible, please indicate department level here. So for question 2, as of the date of the survey, which again, we're looking to describe the staff status of all part-time and full-time faculty that teach in this program. And then please provide the total once all the data is filled in at the bottom. Question 3, of the total in question above, how many are full-time, not full-time equivalents? And then questions 4 and 5, have there been any changes to the faculty complement since last year? And if there have been changes, please describe. Here too, you'll notice that we've greatly reduced the questions asked for gender and ethnicity of faculty, and we've done the same when we kind of get over to graduates. But first, we'll start with faculty. So number 6, we're looking for just the total by gender, male, female, other gender identity, and then please total. Question 7, here we're asking if your program is in the US or its territories. This question is mandatory for the race and ethnicity questions that will now follow. But for example, if you're a Canadian program not in the US, these next few questions will not pertain to you. Okay, so let's get into question 8. Here we're looking for the Hispanic faculty count and the non-Hispanic faculty count. Remember, Hispanic faculty will be denoted as A for future calculation lower down on the page. Question 9, any unknown or race ethnicity for your faculty, that value here. Question 10, of the non-Hispanic faculty only, provide a count by the following categories. Note also too for other, that would be the place where you would include your counts for any non-US residents. And then lastly, for total B here, just sum the above. For question 11, here we will total A, B, and C for the total faculty count. And what we'll do here, we'll do that in the next section as well. Question 12 is just to double check that the totals provided match from question 2, as they do right here with question 11. If yes, proceed. If not, please just go back and review your calculations. All right, I'll pause for a moment. I know that was a lot to go over. Does anyone want to talk through anything a bit more on this page?
Yeah, this is Ken Harwood from George Washington University. Are you considering part-time adjuncts the same thing?
So Anthony, we have
Ken, good question. So what we've tried to do in question 2 and question 3 is a major difference from what existed in the past. And what we tried to do here is have you categorize your academic staff by kind of level that they're within the university. So whether they're a professor or full professor down to a lecturer or, you know, a clinical area or just an instructor. So we've tried to look at that. And then with question 3, we said, of all of the faculty that conceivably teach in your program across all of these different categories, how many are full-time? So you might have, you know, 20 adjuncts, 3 professors, 2 associate professors, but of all of them, only 4 are full-time faculty. Mm-hmm. So I want to be careful to kind of designate, to differentiate faculty status, professor, associate professor, et cetera, from how much are they full-time versus part-time. So I hope that kind of hurts. So if you say, well, adjuncts are the same as part-time, I want to be careful because instructors may be the same as part-time, right. Or lecturers may be the same as part-time. So if they fit into those categories, that's where they should kind of fit.
So just to clarify, there are adjunct faculty that we do provide a title beyond just adjunct faculty. Some we do, some we don't. So is that a good distinguisher that we should just look at those titled and those not?
That's it exactly.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, this was, we felt, the committee felt that this was really a big improvement over what kind of existed last time. It also made it a little simpler to kind of accommodate. And I think the other big improvement in there, and Jen, you just go down a little bit to the race, ethnicity, sure. And gender. Prior to the way these questions were asked, and also on the self-study guide, we had required that your faculty, we look at them by gender, by race, by ethnicity. So, you know, all of those split cells would be there. And we said, that's too fine of a gradation to look for. Instead, we're going to ask you, give us your faculty by gender, then give us your faculty by ethnicity, Hispanic or non-Hispanic, and then for the non-Hispanic faculty, give us the race of your faculty. So that way you're not kind of cutting each individual section by others. It's a simpler way to kind of look at it, and also kind of gets at some of the goals in terms of diversity of faculty and diversity of students. Now, one of the people questioned and said, how would we know about faculty ethnicity? And I don't know. I mean, my gut feeling is that some universities actually require an ethnicity issue, ethnicity questions among the faculty that are there. But I'll open that question up to this group and say, how do your universities typically look at this for faculty? And Paula, even if you wanted to jump in, it'd be great.
Hi. Yes, so I think that's right. I mean, I think if it's unknown, then I think it has to be reported in that way. I think in many institutions, the reporting is voluntary if you want to report on your race and ethnicity. And so I think at least here and in this university, I think we rely on the self-report, and that's what we report, you know, in question 10, for example. And if we don't, then we would put that in 9.
Yeah. Does that work for everyone? Okay, I assume it does. Let me see.
So I'm sorry, to clarify, then you would just put everyone in the unknown categories? What you were suggesting, Paula? Because it's optional?
Yeah. Well, I think if your department or school can't produce that type of demographic information, I suppose that would be the case. I would probably circle back with them to see, though. My guess is that they have something on record.
I'm sorry, they do, but if someone declines to answer, so then they go into question 9.
Yes.
Correct.
Everyone else, we won't have necessarily So then 8 and 10 go together, and 9, okay. 9 is just a separate category. 10 is a subset of 8, okay.
Yes, correct.
Can I ask about program specific versus department level? If faculty are, we have some faculty that are full-time in the program, the CAHME credit program, and some that are department level that teach in our program. How do we count them?
So what you would say there is that the data that you're providing is program specific.
Okay.
Because you know, as an example, you've got 3 faculty member that are full professors who teach in your program, but you also have other professors who teach in your program who are from the department of, you know, school. So you would still count them in that area. But question 3, which asked how many are full-time faculty as of the date of the survey for your program, then you would say, well, we have just 3 full-time people. The rest are kind of borrowed from different departments.
I see. Full-time means, okay, that they're dedicated, actually. They're dedicated. And then the other thing is we have other we have other faculty titles, and I imagine other places do, but we have titles that are not on here. Faculty appointments that are not on here. Scientist track, for example.
Okay. What I'm going to ask is if they can fit closely into any of these categories, great. Again, Jen, could we add an other in there, or does that make it, does that add to, can we do an other category in there as well?
I will try. I think in this question type, it might not be possible. It's a different question type than the other, where we're adding other, but let me try when the webinar is over.
Or if it could be like lecturer / scientist or something like that. If there's a way to put a slash and add something.
Yeah, and I think clinical might be great next to scientists, because I think that's really where that's getting. So is that the one category that you're concerned with at this point?
The scientists, but they're not clinical. It's just the designation of how Hopkins does their appointments.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're not tenured, it's a scientist track or a lecturer track.
Okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's put lecturer / scientist. We'll make that change for you. And that's an easy one for us to do.
Thank you.
Lou Horvath from St. Joseph's University. I have 2 questions. The first is, do you want the demographic profile of the faculty both full-time as well as part-time? And then second question is, if it's adjunct, the reality of adjunct is there are active adjuncts who teach, and there are a whole host of adjuncts who have been inactive for a year or 2. Do you want it of all just the active adjuncts who've taught in the last year, or how would you define that?
Yeah, I think, Lou, that's correct. We would want just the active, the folks who really would have taught in the past year.
And this is Lindsay Brelge again from CU Denver. So we have a few full professors that don't teach in the program anymore, but continue to do research for us. Are you only looking for professors that have a teaching appointment?
So that's a slightly different question than Lou's, which kind of involved adjuncts who aren't really necessarily involved at the university. I think for the case in which you're talking about, you're looking at full professors who are still involved in the department level workings, mostly in the research end of it. I would think, and let me kind of punt this again to Paula, but I would think you would include them in this group. Paula?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Lou, you asked a 2-part question. I'm sorry, I just answered the second part of it. The first part is with the demographic questions, the race, ethnicity, gender ones. You would give it for all of the active faculty.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anthony, is there any more questions in the chat, or should I move forward?
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, great. All right. So moving on to section 5, to review questions related to students and recruitment. You'll notice too, some questions are similarly designed as the faculty questions in the prior section. So question 1, designate criteria required for admission to the program. Questions 2 and 3, state the minimum required GPA, and then also state the median GPA of the newly registered students. And here in both questions, we're looking for the academic year beginning September 2018 and then September 2019. And then question 4 and 5, has there been a change to the program's admission criteria? And if so, please describe that change. Okay, here we're getting into the program's recruitment activity outcomes. So for question 6, for the 2018 to 2019 academic year, we're looking for the complete applications received, students offered admissions, and how many new students enrolled. And just to kind of give a little clarity in regards to the dates for these academic calendars, a few questions had come up. An example for the 2018-2019, residential program X had a start date of September 2018 with that data. Executive program Y had a start date of January 2019 with that data. So basically, executive programs beginning in January 2019 would fall into 2018 to 2019 academic year. And then similarly for question 7, when we're looking at the 2019 to 2020 academic year, the residential program, for example, would start September 2019, but the executive program that would have a start of January 2020, that's what we're looking for here in question 7. Just to kind of give a little background on those 2 different academic years that we're looking for. Kind of same as we move down to questions 8 and 9 of these newly registered students only, kind of fill in this information for how many students matriculated into the program within these following timeframes after obtaining their bachelor's degree. And again, these academic years hold to these examples above. And then lastly for this section, questions 10 and 11, looking for total number of master's level degree candidates enrolled for the same 2 academic years. There's one point too, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention up here when we're looking at the 2019 to 2020 academic year. We do understand that some executive programs perhaps might not have exact data to fill in over here, and in those cases, estimates are permissible. Just given the time frame that we're only in November and the program does have a few more weeks to start. So these numbers, may not be fully finalized yet. So estimates would be just fine to enter here. Any questions on anything on this page?
And for everyone, this is a bit of a change from in the past because we're looking at 2018, 2019, which has been typical, always looking at the past year. But in this particular question, in this survey, we're looking at both last year, complete last academic year, and then also for this current academic year. And we're doing this because some of the publicly reported organizations that we're talking to want the most recent year that's available. So that's why we've kind of opened it up to the more recent data that's there.
So would you guys like us to make projections for spring enrollment then?
Yes.
Okay.
And you should have, what we recognize is that at this particular point when the survey is done, you should have pretty good projections at this level because your application process is probably complete at this point, and you've got as many people, many completed applications as you know, and then you've probably also made your offers at this point. What might be a little off is the actual number of students who will register.
Well, our deadline isn't until December 1st, and we do get a lot of students last minute, especially in our executive program. So as long as you realize and you're okay with just projections, that's fine.
That's good. We'll ask this question again next year the same way. So, at that point, the real numbers will be available next year for the year. So good.
This is Ken Howard from GW again. The only problem that we have with this is the projections themselves may be difficult as we admit students every semester. So we have an admissions process every semester. So obviously we would put the estimates on. I guess my only concern was if the estimates were totally off and we have new numbers next year, how might that be viewed?
It will, that won't be viewed negatively, Ken.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anthony, any questions in chat, or should I move on?
There was a question in chat related to the prior section, which says that we have a category of faculty called teaching professor, which describes a full-time, non-tenure track instructor. Full-time, non-tenure track instructor. My guess is that that would probably go under the instructor category. And unless I hear some disagreement, I would kind of encourage you to kind of throw it in that area.
Well, I will just add, Anthony, here in this department, we actually have, you know, a tenure track line, and then we also have what we call clinical faculty, and that's the teaching, full-time teaching faculty, but we actually have stripped away sort of the clinical piece of it, and so for us they would be categorized as professor in this example.
Okay. All right, so Tina, does that work?
Yeah.
Then you would classify them as a professor then.
Okay. Ours used to be called clinical as well, but now it's teaching professor. So, I mean, they're not assistant and associate and professor are all tenure track here. So it's not really accurate to call them either of any of those.
Okay.
I can still keep them as clinical or instructor if you want.
I would probably just advise you to be consistent with what you've done in the past, but I think Paula's recommendation of putting them in the professor category is acceptable as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Jen. It looks like to the next section.
Yep, sure. Okay, section 6, demographics of graduating students. This is a big change to the survey as we're no longer looking at applicant demographics. Our goal is really to graduate students with diverse backgrounds. So we're now looking at the demographics just for the graduating students. And before I get into this section, you'll notice it's the same format as the faculty questions that we asked previously regarding gender, then regarding race and ethnicity. So to save a bit of time, we'll just kind of look through here. This is the same calculation as we did in faculty. And then lastly, again, we'll ask that same question to be sure that the total graduates calculated right here equal the total number of graduates calculated by gender above here in section 1. I'll certainly pause if you want to talk through anything else.
Jen, let me just, that was an area that was really of concern when we looked at past surveys, is that calculations by race and gender, race and ethnicity varied by the number by gender and varied by the total number of graduates that were projected. So we really want to try to make sure all the numbers foot, and they should all foot. So that's the purpose of that check in question 7. SurveyMonkey doesn't allow us to do an automatic check. We're actually asking you to do the math to make sure the check works. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, question 7 relates to the placement of graduating students and the completion rate. So here in question 1, we're looking at placement of grads within 3 months post-graduation, again from the 2018-2019 academic year. We realize a lot of your students will probably fall into these first 2 categories, but again, interested to see the other categories, get into more detail there and trend that out through the years. Again, after all that's completed, please provide a total to get to our total placed. Here we have a bit of a calculation going on, so I'll try to walk you through it. Regarding the placement of graduates within the 3 months post-graduation, provide the number of graduates not otherwise placed or unknown. So here we have categories already employed in healthcare and stayed in the same position as B, international students returned home without seeking employment as C, pursuing other grad degrees as D, And then we're going to total these 3 excluded categories right here to equal E. I'll explain that in a moment. We're also going to realize that some students are not placed or unknown as F and G. And then over here, we're going to get a total. So we're going to create total H by adding A, our total placed from up above, plus our total of these excluded categories, plus the not placed, plus the unknown. I know that's kind of a lot to settle with. Hopefully these letters are helpful. Again, as we scroll down, really the point of parsing all of this out is in regards to the placement percentage. We want to be sure that programs aren't penalized for these excluded categories when calculating their placement percentage. So again, to get a placement percentage, we'll have total grads divided by, total placed as A, divided by total grads minus those excluded categories. So students that are already employed, returned home, being international students, or pursuing other graduate degrees should not be inclusive in your placement percentage calculation. Again, if the placement percentage is less than 80%, please describe why and the process that will be used to improve that percentage. And then looking for the question 6, the completion rate in the normal period of time expected. Please add that here, and if it's less than 80%, please explain. And then just the last 2 questions here relate to fellowship and residency and jobs, looking for the median starting salary for both, as well as the number of reporting graduates to get to those figures. I'll certainly pause. I'm sure we may have a few questions regarding the calculations. I'm happy to answer.
And this is one the committee was really helpful in looking at, particularly when we looked at the excluded categories and how do we get that. We've purposely put unknown in the not placed categories to say, hey, one of the requirements that we look at from CAHME is where are your graduates placed? So if you don't know that, then, you know, unfortunately you are kind of penalized as a percentage. So, but hopefully you do know it. Someone's going to ask the question, I'm sorry.
Sorry, this is Lindsay Belgi again from CU Denver. So we really work hard throughout the students program to get them employed if they don't come into the program already employed. So the vast majority of our graduates do find jobs in healthcare before graduation. That's still, so am I looking at students that came into the program unemployed and then used our network in order to gain employment, or am I only looking at students who went at the time that they graduate were unemployed?
That's a really great question. Thanks for asking. And I think the important part about that question and the way that we're asking it, and the reason why we're asking it, is we want to make sure that the students are, you know, the goal is to make students are placed in a job that's, you know, functional. Now, whether they've got that placement like the week before they graduated or the week after, that really, you know, that really doesn't matter. The point of it is, have they been placed within 3 months post-graduation? If you place them while they still haven't graduated in particular roles and you had done that, you did your job. So you would calculate them in this area. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hey, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi. This is Ann Letterman. I'm calling from NYU, Wagner. So we survey, I put this in the chat, but we survey our graduating class 6, 8, and 10 months post-graduation. So we don't have data yet, and we won't, I think, by the time we have to submit the survey for the 18-19 class. I don't know if we're the only school who is in this situation, but can we use the 17-18 graduating class? Or will the survey not let me submit because it might be, the response may be tied to another question with the number of graduates?
And yeah, you know what? Let's you and I talk offline about that.
Okay, great.
But that's a really good question. But yeah, we should definitely talk offline.
Terrific. Thank you. I'll follow up.
This is Karen Sharon. I posted a question about question 8.
Okay, I see it. Does question 8 refer only to postgraduate fellowships, residencies, or also refer to the residencies that are built-in requirements? Really good question. I think if the residencies are built in and they're part of your curriculum, what we should ask is 3 months after graduation, did they get a job? So for residencies and fellowships that are built in, then the question, then the reasonableness, I think the way to approach it would be to say that that would not be considered a fellowship residency, that they got a job afterwards.
That's how I interpret it. Thank you. And if they went on to another fellowship, put them in that spot.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. Good question. I know we're losing a lot of people at this point.
Hi, so this is Gwen Swain.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is Gwen Swain with Pfeiffer University. So yes. About 95% of our students are employed when they come into the program. And they continue that employment upon graduation. Some of them are promoted to a different position. Some of them have going into the program to get, and the employment continues. How would we count that?
Good question, Gwen, and we've tried to accommodate that. If you can go up a little bit, Jen, to that area. So go up to the top. So provide a count for place students, including students who were employed but received a promotion. So if it was a student who were employed and continued in their current job, go down a little, Jen, at this point. So those students would fit as already employed in healthcare and stayed in the same position post-graduation. So they're one of the excluded class. Now, who wouldn't be excluded is, say, a student who was employed at McDonald's, but stayed in the same position post-graduation. They would not, in other words, they didn't get the opportunity to participate in healthcare. So they wouldn't fit in this category. But if someone was already employed in healthcare and stayed in the same position, this is where you would throw them. So you're not penalized in those instances. Make sense? Gwen?
Understood, and thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Someone posted,
I'm sorry, yes, that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Gwen. Someone posted, question for number 6, how is the completion rate calculated? We admit students twice a year. The program is 2.5 years for a full-time, but our students mostly take part-time, but our students are mostly part-time and take different numbers of courses per semester. So how is the completion rate calculated? So this is a common question that we ask on the self-study period. It's a question that we've asked in the survey period in the past. It's really looking at, the goal of this is to say, when students come into the program with the expected length of time of the program, how many of them graduate within that normal time? So if your program's 2.5 years and that's the typical amount of time, part-time, full-time, then you need to look at it for full-time. If it takes longer for part-times and your typical amount of time for a part-time student is, say, 3.5 or 4 years, what's the percent that kind of worked within that area, graduated within that time frame? So it's really a calculation that we're assuming that you're going to use your particular situation and look at in as accurate and fair manner as possible. So I hope that helped. I understand part-time students, but there is an expectation that if you come in as a part-time student, you will graduate within a given time period. And Paul, I don't know if you want to add any clarification onto that.
No, I think that's right.
Okay.
Anthony, this is Ken again from GW. One of the things that we had a discussion when we were doing the healthcare quality accreditation, healthcare quality and safety accreditation document, was to use the Department of Labor's 150% of the expected time as a realistic goal. You're saying not to use that, to use what you write. If you say that this program should be completed in 2, that you want us to use the 2 years.
If you know, I'm not sure. Paula, your thoughts? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk about this one too offline.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, listening to all these questions, it just reminds you there's so much variation. It's really hard to capture all of it. But I think these are good points, and maybe we can just discuss it a little bit more.
Agreed.
Thanks.
The goal of it, Ken, is, are you graduating students in the time frame that you're expecting them to graduate? And that's one of the things that we're supposed to look at as an accreditor. And if your time frame is 2 years and you're graduating them in 3 or 4, that's problematic.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand, but the issue I know we had a very long discussion on this when we were doing the accreditation standards. So I think we finally settled on the 150 because it's kind of a standard. But I understand the either side of it. I think we wrote kind of a rationale for that in the document that we submitted. So there may be some information there.
Okay, and that could be the area where you explain in part 7. Where if it's less than the 80%, you could say, hey, we used the 150 percentage estimate and describe it in there, what you've done. Okay, we'll get back to you with that though. I know we're really past our time. Jen, I think we're done at this point. Is it the next one goes to the...
You're right, it's just the details on who filled out the survey. So yeah. That's all I had.
Okay. Jen is available for you to ask some specific questions on the survey or some logistics. Certainly reach out to her. Again, thank you all for your participation on this call. I think these were really good questions. I hope you see in the survey some major improvements over what we've done in the past, as well as a more simplified, streamlined approach. We took a lot of feedback and we spent a lot of time working on this. So again, thank you all for your help and your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Anthony.
You're welcome. Take care.